Jake Fletcher had never been one for adventure. He was a simple man, born and raised on Earth, content with his unremarkable life as a mechanic on the orbital station, Earth Station Alpha. The job was steady fixing ships for traders and travelers passing through the Milky Way, and life was, if not exciting, at least predictable. Jake liked predictable. He didn't crave the excitement or danger that came with space exploration. He preferred to keep his feet on the ground, or in this case, in zero gravity, surrounded by nuts, bolts, and a floating toolbox. That all changed the day they arrived. Jake was halfway through repairing the thrusters on an old freighter when a strange hum filled the docking bay. His hand froze, wrench suspended mid-air, as the air around him vibrated. Something was coming. Something big. He stepped out of the maintenance hatch just in time to see a sleek, shimmering craft descend through the station's docking ring. It was unlike any ship he'd ever seen, smooth, with no visible engines or seams, just a seamless blend of alien technology that hummed with a power beyond anything Earth could dream of. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that ship. Everyone in the galaxy did. It belonged to the Galactic Council. Jake dropped his wrench. No way. The Council was the most powerful governing body in the known universe, a coalition of species from across the stars. Earth wasn't even considered a significant player. Humans were small-time, isolated from the galactic politics that shaped the lives of millions of worlds. Sure, Earth had joined the interstellar community a few decades ago, but they were barely a footnote in the grand scheme of things. For the Council to send a ship to Earth Station Alpha? That was unheard of. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, nerves prickling at the back of his neck. Why were they here? More importantly, why were they here for him? Before Jake could run back into the safety of the maintenance bay, the ship's doors slid open with a soft hiss, and two figures emerged. The first was a towering Xerian, its silver skin catching the artificial light of the docking bay. It had 4 muscular arms and piercing eyes that seemed to scan every detail of its surroundings. The Xerians were the Council's enforcers, powerful, logical, and utterly intimidating. Jake swallowed hard. The second figure was less imposing but no less strange. A shimmering, translucent being floated beside the Xerian, its form constantly shifting like liquid light. This was Draylox, one of the Council's more mysterious members, capable of telepathy. Jake Fletcher? Draylox's voice wasn't audible in the traditional sense, it echoed in Jake's mind, soft yet commanding. Jake blinked, not sure whether to nod or run. "Why yeah," he stammered, feeling his legs wobble as the Xerian approached him. "That's me." "What's going on?" "You have been summoned by the Galactic Council," Draylox said, the words reverberating inside his skull. "You will accompany us immediately." "Summoned?" Jake felt his stomach lurch. "Summoned by the Council? I don't understand. What do you want with me?" "I haven't done anything." The Xerian stepped forward, its 4 arms crossing in front of its chest as it towered over Jake. "You will comply," it said in a deep, rumbling voice. Okay. Jake raised his hands in surrender. He wasn't about to argue with a creature that could probably crush him with one hand. "Just give me a second to grab my stuff." "There is no time," Draylox said, its voice growing fainter as the Xerian ushered Jake toward the ship. As Jake was practically pushed aboard the shimmering vessel, his mind raced. Why would the Galactic Council want him? He was a nobody, just a mechanic scraping by in a corner of the galaxy that no one cared about. There had to be some mistake. The doors of the alien ship sealed shut behind him with a soft hum, and he was engulfed in an eerie silence. The interior was just as seamless as the exterior, no visible controls, no seats, just smooth, curved walls that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid metal. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as the ship lifted off, and before he knew it, they were zooming into the void of space, leaving Earth Station Alpha far behind. He stumbled forward, looking for anything to hold onto as the ship accelerated faster than any human craft could. His stomach flipped, but the feeling passed quickly, replaced by an odd sense of calm as the ship adjusted its gravity field. "We are en route to Valerones," Dreylox's voice echoed in his mind, the seat of the Galactic Council. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Valerones was legendary, the political and cultural center of the galaxy. It was where kings, presidents, and rulers gathered to discuss the fates of worlds. It was where the council made its decrees, deciding which species thrived and which fell into oblivion. And now, somehow, Jake Fletcher, a mechanic from Earth, was on his way there. "Why?" Jake whispered, more to himself than to his alien captors. "Why me?" But there was no response from Dreylox. The ship's interior remained silent, the walls pulsating faintly as they hurtled through hyperspace. Jake sank to the floor, his mind spinning with 1,000 questions. None of it made sense. Hours passed, maybe days. It was impossible to tell in the strange, timeless space of the Council's ship until, finally, the ship shuddered and slowed. A new sensation rippled through Jake's body as the ship dropped out of hyperspace. He stood up, peering through the shimmering walls, his breath catching as the view outside became clear. Valerones. The Citadel of Stars, as it was called, hovered in the blackness of space, a massive, sprawling city that gleamed with 1,000 different lights. Towers spiraled into the void, each one designed in the unique architecture of the alien species that called it home. The entire structure floated between two binary stars, their light casting a golden glow over the city. It was breathtaking and terrifying all at once. Jake was still processing the grandeur of the alien city when the ship docked with the central tower, its doors sliding open. "Follow us," the Zarian ordered, and Jake had little choice but to obey. As they led him through the gleaming halls of the Citadel, Jake could feel eyes on him. Alien beings of all shapes and sizes watched him with curiosity, amusement, and in some cases, disgust. He could hear whispers, languages he couldn't understand, but one thing was clear. They all knew why he was here. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. What had he done? Finally, they entered the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, a vast hall filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. At the center sat a massive throne made of black stone, and on it sat King Kravak, ruler of the Scythoraxians, one of the most feared species in the galaxy. His hulking frame was draped in ornate robes, his scaled skin glinting under the chamber's lights. Jake froze as Kravak's 4 eyes locked onto him with a fury that sent chills down his spine. "Jake Fletcher of Earth," a voice boomed, though it wasn't Dreylox. It was one of the Council's senior members, a reptilian creature with a regal bearing. "You have been summoned here to answer for your actions." "My actions?" Jake managed, his voice weak. The chamber fell silent as Kravak stood from his throne, his towering form casting a shadow over the room. "You," he snarled, pointing a clawed finger at Jake, "have defiled my daughter, the Princess of Scythorax." Jake's world spun. He was here because of Zalera? The shy, quiet alien girl he had met months ago while repairing a ship? They had spent hours talking about engines, about life, and one night. Oh no. The room erupted in laughter as the truth dawned on Jake. He, a mere human mechanic, had gotten the alien king's daughter pregnant. And now the entire galaxy knew. Jake stood frozen, his mind racing as King Kravak's accusation echoed through the chamber. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, it seemed like time had stopped. He could feel the weight of every alien gaze on him, hundreds of eyes from creatures of all shapes and sizes, staring at him with disbelief, mockery, and even pity. His mouth felt dry, his body rigid as if he had been petrified by the enormity of the situation. Defiled his daughter? Jake thought. His heart thudded in his chest. How did it come to this? The chamber, filled with powerful galactic figures, began to murmur, a growing wave of laughter and whispers. But their amusement was nothing compared to the cold, burning hatred that radiated from King Kravak. Standing at an imposing 12 feet, Kravak was a terrifying sight. His muscular frame was draped in the dark, ceremonial armor of his people, and his skin like polished obsidian reflected the harsh light of the council hall. His 4 blood-red eyes glowed with fury, and his jagged teeth were bared in a menacing snarl. "I'll say it again, human," Kravak growled, his voice deep and filled with venom. "You have defiled my daughter." I didn't know, Jake stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. His legs felt like jelly, and his stomach twisted in knots. He had known Zalera was the daughter of someone important, but he hadn't known this. The silence was punctuated by a sudden booming laugh. It came from an alien with shimmering blue scales, a member of the Galactic Council. A human? With the Scytheraxian princess? The creature's mouth twisted into a grin of cruel amusement. This has to be some kind of cosmic joke. Jake's face burned. His thoughts were spinning out of control. Zalera. They had spent so much time together, talking about space travel, sharing stories of their worlds. And yes, things had gotten out of hand one night, but it had felt real. It was real. He cared about her. He loved her. But now, none of that mattered. King Kravak's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. "You dare laugh at my shame?" He turned toward the council members, his eyes narrowing dangerously. The laughter died instantly. Kravak wasn't someone you mocked without consequences. Jake's mind raced, desperate to explain himself, but what could he possibly say? In the eyes of the galaxy, he had committed an unforgivable crime not just against Kravak, but against the powerful, centuries-old traditions of the Scytheraxian people. Before Jake could gather his thoughts, the king's voice thundered again, this time shaking the very walls of the chamber. "My daughter, Princess Zalera, is sacred to my people. She is of royal blood, destined for greatness, not to be sullied by some pitiful human." Kravak's voice dripped with contempt. "How dare you, Fletcher of Earth? How dare you stain my family's honor with your weak, insignificant bloodline?" Jake opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. He wasn't even sure what to say. Before he could answer, the massive doors of the chamber swung open with a deafening clang. A figure stepped through, her movements slow and deliberate. All eyes turned to her, Princess Zalera. Jake felt his heart drop. Zalera looked even more fragile under the intense lights of the council chamber. Her soft, emerald skin glistened faintly, and her uneven eyes darted nervously across the room. Her small tentacles, once playful and expressive, were now tightly coiled against her face. She wore a long, flowing gown of Scytheraxian silk, a rich indigo that shimmered as she walked, but the elegance of her attire did nothing to mask the tension in the room. The chamber fell silent as Zalera approached, her gaze locked on Jake. Her expression was unreadable. Was it fear? Embarrassment? Something else? King Kravak's eyes softened slightly as his daughter approached, though his fury was still palpable. "Zalera," he rumbled, his voice taking on a more paternal tone. "You should not be here." Zalera lifted her chin, her voice trembling but firm. "Father, I have come to speak for myself." The king's brow furrowed, but he allowed her to speak. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. Zalera turned to face the council members, her voice gaining strength as she addressed them. "I know what I have done goes against our traditions. I know this is not what was expected of me." She glanced at Jake, her eyes softening for a brief moment. "But this was my choice." A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. The council members whispered among themselves, their expressions shifting from mockery to intrigue. No one had expected this, least of all Jake. "You chose this human?" Kravak's voice was incredulous, his fury now mingled with disbelief. "You chose to disgrace our family, our people, by mating with a creature so beneath us?" Zalera flinched but didn't back down. "I love him, father," she said quietly, but her words carried weight in the silence of the hall. "Jake is not beneath me. He is kind, and he understands me in a way that no one else does. The council members gasped. Love? Between a human and a Scytheraxian princess? This was unheard of. Some of the delegates, the more conservative ones, scowled in disgust, while others watched with curious interest. It wasn't often that the Galactic Council witnessed such scandal, and they were more than entertained by the spectacle. Kravak, however, was far from amused. Love? The word twisted in his mouth as though it were something vile. You speak of love while you have brought shame upon your entire race. Zalera, you are a princess. You were destined to unite our people with a powerful alliance, not to bear the child of some human. Jake's breath hitched. Child? The room erupted once more in whispers, some shocked, others barely containing their amusement. A human and a Scytheraxian having a child? The idea was as absurd as it was scandalous. King Kravak's eyes locked onto Jake, his fury now absolute. You have not only corrupted my daughter, but you have also cursed her with your offspring. His voice shook with rage. I should kill you where you stand. Jake's blood ran cold. Kravak's words weren't just for show. The king was perfectly capable of carrying out that threat. Jake could feel the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on him. He had made a terrible mistake, and now his life and the life of Zalera and their unborn child hung in the balance. But before Kravak could act, Dralox, the telepathic counselor, floated forward, its shimmering form casting an eerie glow over the chamber. King Kravak, Dralox's voice echoed in the minds of everyone present. Before any decisions are made, the Galactic Council must deliberate. This situation is unprecedented. Kravak growled, but after a long, tense moment, he nodded. The king may have been powerful, but even he had to respect the authority of the council. Dralox turned its glowing eyes toward Jake, and for the first time, Jake felt something other than hostility. Was it pity? The council will convene tomorrow, Dralox announced, its voice soft but firm. We must decide what is to be done with the human and with the child. Jake swallowed hard. The weight of the words hit him like a sledgehammer. His future, Zalera's future, and the future of their unborn child now rested in the hands of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The Zarian guards moved to escort Jake out of the chamber. As they led him away, his eyes met Zalera's one last time. She looked at him with a mixture of sadness and resolve. I'm sorry, Jake whispered, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. Zalera's eyes softened, and she gave him the smallest of nods, as if to say, we'll find a way. But as the doors of the council chamber closed behind him, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Tomorrow, the council would decide his fate and the fate of his unborn child. And nothing, not even love, would save him from the wrath of the Galactic Council. The next morning, the entire galaxy was buzzing with the news. Jake Fletcher, an unremarkable human mechanic from a backwater planet, had committed an act so scandalous, so shocking, that it had the whole universe talking. A human had not only been involved with an alien princess, but had gotten her pregnant. The scandal didn't just ripple through the galactic capital of Valerones, it exploded across the stars, reaching every corner of the cosmos. Jake lay on the cold floor of his holding cell, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't slept. How could he? His mind was a whirlpool of fear and guilt. He had brought Zalera into this mess, and now they were both paying for it. The worst part wasn't even Kravak's wrath, it was the endless unknown that awaited him. What would the council decide? Would they execute him? Imprison him? Or something worse? A buzzing sound echoed from the cell door, and it slid open with a mechanical hiss. Two Zarian guards stepped in, their 4 silver arms crossed menacingly. Time to go, human, one of them growled. Jake sighed and pushed himself to his feet, feeling the weight of his fate bearing down on him. The Zarians flanked him as they marched down the sterile, metallic corridors of the Citadel. His heart pounded in his chest as they approached the council chamber once more. As the doors slid open, Jake was greeted by a sea of alien faces. The Galactic Council was in full attendance, an assembly of some of the most powerful beings in the universe, representing species from every corner of the galaxy. Hundreds of eyes, tentacles, sensors, and appendages focused on him as he entered the chamber. The murmurs from the crowd of alien dignitaries seated in the balconies above sent a wave of anxiety crawling up his spine. Jake was led to the center of the chamber, where Zalera stood already, her eyes lowered. Her expression was hard to read, but Jake could feel the tension radiating from her. She must have been terrified. So was he. At the far end of the chamber, King Kravax sat on his throne, glaring down at them both. His face was an unreadable mask of fury and disgust. The silence was oppressive. Suddenly, a loud, thundering voice boomed from one of the counselors, a massive creature with the head of a serpent and the body of a humanoid. "Let us begin." Counselor Draylox, the telepathic entity that had initially summoned Jake, floated forward, its liquid-like body shimmering. It cast an unsettling glow as it hovered above the assembly. "Jake Fletcher," Draylox projected its thoughts directly into his mind. "The Council has convened to determine your fate, and the fate of the child growing inside Princess Zalera." The mention of the child sent a ripple of gasps and whispers through the chamber. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy watched with bated breath, eager to see how this unprecedented scandal would unfold. Jake's chest tightened. This was more than just his life now. Zalera's future, the fate of their unborn child, it all rested in the hands of the Galactic Council. The Serpentine Counselor, Cythera, spoke next, his long, forked tongue flicking in the air. "This situation is without precedent. A human mating with a Scytheraxian princess? It is unthinkable." A chorus of murmurs followed his words. Jake's fists clenched at his sides, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He hadn't meant for any of this to happen, but the way they spoke about him as if he were some kind of disease made his blood boil. King Kravax stood, his towering form casting a long shadow across the chamber. "Unthinkable is an understatement," he snarled, his voice deep and filled with contempt. "This human has humiliated me before the entire galaxy. My daughter, my bloodline tainted by a lowly creature from a backwater planet. It is an offense that cannot be forgiven." Kravax's eyes blazed as he turned toward Jake. "You have shamed my people, human. You have violated the sanctity of the Scytheraxian royal family. By all rights, you should be executed for your transgressions." Jake swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words like a death sentence. He could almost feel the noose tightening around his neck. His palms were slick with sweat. "But," Kravax's voice took on a strange tone, something between bitterness and calculation, "there is another matter that complicates this scandal." The chamber fell into a deep, uncomfortable silence as Kravax's eyes flicked toward Zalera. She shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. Jake's pulse quickened. "The child," Kravax said, his voice lowering to a dangerous rumble. "It seems that this abomination growing inside my daughter is something more than we anticipated." The room seemed to freeze. Every council member, every dignitary, every observer held their breath as they waited for Kravax to continue. "This is no ordinary pregnancy," the king growled. "Scytheraxian blood is sacred strong. But this human has somehow fused with it. The child my daughter carries is special." Jake blinked, confusion washing over him. "Special? What did that mean?" Counselor Draylox floated forward, its shimmering form rippling. "Our scans confirm it. The unborn child is unlike anything we've seen before. Its genetic makeup is unique, a blend of human and Scytheraxian DNA that carries properties neither species possesses on its own." Jake's mind reeled. Was the child stronger? Different? Why was this important to them? Draylox's thoughts pressed deeper into his mind, giving him a glimpse of what they had discovered. The child could potentially possess abilities beyond that of either species, a power that could rival even the greatest rulers of the galaxy. Suddenly, Jake understood why they were so interested. It wasn't just about the scandal anymore. It was about power. The child was a potential game changer. A wild card in the delicate balance of galactic politics. Kravak's voice thundered again. The child may be of royal blood, but it is still an affront to my people. And yet, the Galactic Council has made it clear that this child is too valuable to simply discard. Jake's head spun. He wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. On one hand, it seemed like his child's unique nature was saving him from immediate execution. On the other hand, what did this mean for the future? For his child? Counselor Sithra leaned forward, his forked tongue flicking as he spoke. The council has debated at length what to do with you, human. King Kravak demands justice. But the child presents an opportunity. An opportunity that the council cannot ignore. Jake felt Zalara's hand brush against his, and for a moment, the terror melted away. She was with him. They were in this together. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. The council has reached a decision, Draylock said, its voice resonating in Jake's mind like a drumbeat. Jake Fletcher, you and Princess Zalara will be allowed to live. A rush of relief flooded Jake's chest, but it was short-lived. However, Draylock continued, you will both be exiled from the central worlds of the galaxy. You will be sent to the fringes of space, far from the eyes of the Galactic Council, where you will raise your child in isolation. Jake's relief turned to cold dread. Exile? The Council cannot allow this scandal to be a permanent stain on our reputation, Draylock explained. But the child must be monitored. We will send representatives to ensure its development and assess its potential. If it proves to be the prophesied being, we will act accordingly. A murmur spread through the chamber, and Jake felt a heavy pit form in his stomach. They were sparing his life, but at what cost? Would they take his child if it became too powerful? Would they return one day and rip apart the family he and Zalara would try to build? King Kravak sneered from his throne. Exile is more than you deserve, human. But the council has spoken. Jake looked over at Zalara. She was still standing tall, her eyes filled with both sadness and hope. In that moment, he knew that no matter what the future held, he would fight for her for them. They might be exiled to the farthest reaches of space, but they would be together. Draylock's voice echoed in his mind one last time. Prepare yourselves, Jake Fletcher. The galaxy will not forget this day. And the child you bring into this world may change everything. The chamber doors slid open behind them, and the Zarian guards began to escort them out. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. He squeezed Zalara's hand, and together, they walked into the unknown. The galactic news feeds blared with the story for days. Human mechanic exiled after getting alien princess pregnant. Scytheraxian royal family in crisis, the shocking scandal. But for Jake and Zalara, there was no turning back now. They were no longer players in the great game of the Galactic Council. Now, they were outlaws. The icy blackness of space stretched endlessly before them. Stars twinkled in the distance, but their light felt cold and far away, much like the life Jake Fletcher had once known. The small ship hummed quietly as it drifted through the lonely expanse, its destination a distant planet on the very fringes of the galaxy. Inside the ship, Jake sat in the pilot's seat, staring out into the vast emptiness. His thoughts churned with the weight of everything that had happened. Exiled. Cast out of the known galaxy, away from Earth, from everything familiar, with nothing but the unknown ahead of them. He glanced at the navigation screen, the coordinates flashing softly. Their new home was a remote world, hidden deep within the furthest reaches of space, far from the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council. Beside him, Zalara sat quietly, her hands resting gently on her stomach, where their unborn child was growing. Her expression was serene, but Jake knew the storm that was brewing inside her. The weight of their exile, the uncertainty of their future, and the fate of their child, all of it hung over them like a dark cloud. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked, his voice soft in the quiet of the cockpit. Zalera looked at him, her uneven eyes full of emotion. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm scared and angry, but also hopeful. We're free now. We're together. That's all that matters, isn't it?" Jake reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Yeah," he said, though the knot of worry in his chest told him otherwise. "That's all that matters." But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that their freedom was an illusion. The Galactic Council had spared them for now, but they had made it clear that they would be watching. The child growing inside Zalera wasn't just their child anymore. It was something more. Something powerful. Something dangerous. And Jake knew that the Council would never truly leave them alone. Their child was a wild card in the galaxy's delicate balance of power, and Jake feared that one day, the Council would come back for them, if not for him and Zalera, then for the child. They traveled in silence for hours, the ship navigating the vast darkness toward their destination. The stars outside seemed colder, more distant, a reminder of how far they had fallen from the Galactic Council's reach. Finally, the navigation system beeped, signaling that they were approaching their new home. Jake brought the ship out of hyperspace, and the barren planet appeared on the screen, a small, rocky world orbiting a dying sun. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. As they descended toward the planet's surface, the ship's sensors began to scan the landscape. Jagged mountains rose from the surface like the broken teeth of a giant beast. The ground was a reddish-brown, cracked and dry, with little vegetation in sight. The air was breathable, but barely. This world had once been part of a thriving star system, but now it was little more than a desolate wasteland, forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. Jake guided the ship toward a small clearing nestled between two mountain ranges. It was sheltered, hidden from any prying eyes that might come looking for them. The ship touched down with a soft thud, and the hum of the engines powered down. Silence enveloped them once again. "This is it," Jake said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Home sweet home." Zalera smiled softly, but there was sadness in her eyes. "It's not much," she said quietly, "but it's ours." They stepped out of the ship, their feet crunching on the dry, cracked ground. The air was thin and bitter, and the wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it the eerie sound of desolation. The planet was a far cry from the bustling worlds they had both known, but it was a place to start over. Jake looked around, taking in the landscape. He had once imagined building a home on Earth, somewhere peaceful and green, but now that dream seemed like a lifetime ago. This planet wasn't Earth, and it wasn't Valorones, but it was the only place left where they could build a future. They spent the next few days setting up their new life. The ship's onboard systems helped them build a small shelter, equipped with basic amenities just enough to survive. The land was harsh, but they found ways to make it livable. The ship's replicators provided food and water, and they used solar panels to generate power. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for now. As the days passed, Jake and Zalera began to settle into a routine. They worked together, side by side, building a life from the ashes of their exile. But beneath the surface, Jake could feel the tension building. The weight of the child growing inside Zalera was ever present, a constant reminder that their exile wasn't just about survival. It was about what their child represented. One night, as they sat by a small fire outside their shelter, Jake noticed Zalera's hands trembling. She had been distant all day, her usual calm replaced by a nervous energy. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, leaning in closer to her. Zalera looked up at him, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. "I've been having dreams," she said quietly. "Dreams?" Jake frowned. "What kind of dreams?" Zalera hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "In the dreams, our child is born, but it's not just a child. It's something more. Something powerful. I can feel it inside me, growing stronger every day. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had felt the same unease, but hearing her say it out loud made it all too real. "What do you think it means?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zalera looked away, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I don't know. But I can feel the power inside the baby. It's like a storm, waiting to be unleashed. And I think the council knows." Jake's blood ran cold. Of course the council knew. They had hinted as much during the trial. The child was special, unique. A fusion of two species that had never before mingled. Jake had hoped they would be able to live in peace, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy, but deep down, he knew that peace was fragile. He took Zalera's hand in his, squeezing it tightly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I won't let anyone take you or our child away." Zalera smiled softly, but her eyes were filled with uncertainty. "I believe you, Jake. But I think we both know that the council won't leave us alone forever. Our child is too important." Jake's jaw tightened. He had been trying to ignore that fact, but now it was staring him in the face. The child wasn't just theirs anymore. It was a symbol, a weapon, a tool that the Galactic Council would want to control. And one day, they would come for it. The fire crackled between them, the flames dancing in the darkness. The wind howled through the mountains, and the stars above twinkled like distant, uncaring gods. Jake stared into the flames, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. Exile had saved them for now, but it wouldn't last forever. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Zalera's body. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. "Zalera!" Jake shouted, rushing to her side. I think it's happening," she whispered, her face pale. "The baby." Panic surged through Jake as he helped her to the ground, his mind racing. It was too soon. The child wasn't supposed to come yet. But as he held her, watching her struggle through the pain, Jake realized something. This wasn't just the birth of a child. This was the birth of something far more powerful than he had ever imagined. As the night stretched on and the stars above bore witness, Jake could feel the storm that Zalera had spoken of. It wasn't just a child they were bringing into the world, it was something that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. And as their baby's first cry pierced the stillness of the night, Jake knew, with chilling certainty, that their lives and the galaxy would never be the same. From the distance, far beyond the known reaches of space, a ship hovered in the void. Hidden from view, its sleek, alien design shimmered against the blackness of the stars. Inside, a figure watched the events unfold on a screen, their expression unreadable. "Inform the council," the figure said softly. "The child has been born."